I now have all the rods in place with their posts for all the table keys. The G-sharp key is done. I think you saw that before. And I've also got the C, the low C sharp, has a cup on it now with the arm, and now I just have to start making linkages for all the table keys. So that's where we're at right now. So there's the low B spatula finished. I soldered it all together at the same time, but I'm not going to solder it onto the rod yet until I get the pad cup made and the arm and get that soldered onto the rod, and then I can make sure that this is rotated properly. That'll be the last thing to do for the B key. So now that the low B spatula is done, I can start on the low B flat, and I've started to make this arm here. So it's going to sit over that key like so, and it's going to come into contact with this arm. So I'm going to start grinding away the top of this so that the spatula sits level with the rest of the table keys. So I now have the low B flat and low B spatulas finished, soldered onto their arms. I have not soldered the arms onto the rods yet. I'm going to wait until I get the pad cups soldered on, and then I will make sure that these are rotated correctly and do those solders last. The last one to do is the C-sharp spatula, and I've already got the cup on for that one. So that's probably going to be the first one that I solder completely. There's all the table key spatulas soldered up now. They're still not soldered to the rods. They're just sitting there loosely. So they will be a little bit tighter together when they're soldered. So now I have to make the cups for the low B and the low B flat. That should be fun. So I'm just getting ready to make the pad cup for the low B. So I've got my brass cut out, roughed out, and I'm just going to anneal it now to soften up the brass, and then we'll take it to the lathe. Okay, so I have my annealed brass sandwiched between the mandrel and a piece of steel here. I've got my cross slide set to 0 so that there's just enough space for the sheet brass to fit between the steel ball and the mandrel. So I've got that all set, zeroed up, and I am going to spin this, and hopefully we can make a saxophone pad cup. So that's 3 different attempts on trying to spin a large sax pad cup. I think I'm going to go to plan B, which I really didn't want to do. But plan B is going to be just a sheet of brass and a separate sheet, a thin, long strip, rolled around and soldered onto that flat piece of brass. Hopefully it's going to look somewhat like a pad cup. Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed with that. This is 2 different thicknesses of brass too. It just kept binding and cracking. This one actually tore right apart. That was the last one. So plan B. So I ended up making a strip of brass, soldered that together, made this plate, bent it in a little bit, a little rim on here. So that's the finished cup. I can clean that up a little bit more, but that'll basically be it. And now I can start soldering the low B key together and then the low B flat, and all the key work will be done. Okay, so I have the arm roughed out for the low B, and this is the cup where I had to solder a ring for the lip. So I'm really hoping that that solder is not going to come undone while I solder the arm onto the cup. I've got some cool gel around. Hopefully that's going to help keep that a little bit cool while I heat up the cup, and hopefully everything goes as planned. Oh, here we go. I think we were successful. Now that I have the arm soldered onto the rod, I'm going to solder on this little bumper ring, and I've just used solder paste underneath that, so I'm just going to heat it up slightly. It's not going to take that much. This stuff flows pretty easily. That's it. So I'm just about ready to solder the low B spatula on. I've got the cup pad just about, pretty well completely open, just enough room for a bumper felt. And I've got the spatula exactly where I need it. And so I've just put a little bit of silver soldering flux on there just to temporarily hold it in place so I can take the key off, get it in the jig, and I'll silver solder that together. So this is going to be the arm for the low B flat key. Just got it drawn out roughly here. I'll carve all this out so that it fits perfectly to the cup, and I'll drill a hole in here for the rod, and we'll see how that turns out. So all the key work is done now. The low B flat and the low B are done. I'll just come around. Okay, and there's the table keys all in place. The very last thing to do, I think, as far as soldering, is figuring out exactly where this neck ring needs to be so that the sax hangs properly. I also may put a peg on the bottom, so when you're sitting down you can put a peg to the floor and take some of the weight off your neck. Other than that, I'll figure out where this ring goes, and then I can start cleaning up the body, and then we can sandblast it. So once I had all the key work finished on the sax, I wanted to check the position of the neck ring, make sure that the sax hung right and in the right rotation. So I put everything together, put all the keys on for balance, put the neck on, and the ring is in the perfect spot. I love it. So I'm not going to change that at all. The only thing that I forgot that I need to do is I need to plug up this low rear E flat, and I've actually got a pad cup engraved that says Michael Garding number 5 or something like that, and that's gonna just probably Velcro right on top of that plug. And then I can start cleaning up the horn, and hopefully we'll get to sandblast it. So here's the finished Bari Sax modification. This is saxophone number 5 for me. When I got this Bari, it was in pieces. The bell was detached from the body, and I would say at least half the keys were missing. So the very first mod I did was with the low bell key tone holes. This low B tone hole used to be around the other side of the bell. That's how they made those back then. So I cut the bell, I spun the section around so that these tone holes are now in line, and they're both on the right side of the body for modern key work. So that was the first modification I did. One thing I completely forgot to video capture when I was rebuilding this Bari Sax is when the body was still apart, I had actually cut the main tube in half just above the F sharp, and I rotated this lower stack about 15 degrees, more like a modern horn. I made this ring to solder the body parts back together, and it's just a more modern feel. It's more ergonomic to play. The lower stack consisted of the low or rear E flat down here. That's not a key anymore. I just plugged that up, and that cup is actually engraved. It says Michael Garding number 5, 2021. With the lower stack, I terminated the shaft at the F sharp. It used to extend up to the G sharp, but I terminated that shaft system at the F sharp, and the G sharp is now on this shaft system, which shares the upper shaft. And I had to modify the G sharp because the pad cup was in the wrong position compared to the distance from the shaft to the cup. So I modified that. I've also modified the upper stack system. It used to be one long shaft that came down to the bis, sharing the G as well. I didn't like that. So I terminated the upper stack at the A like a regular Yamaha, and continued it again with the G sharp and the extra part of the bis. The G is now on its own shaft system, which I like much better. Some octave key work that I had to make, like this key up here, I had to make that as well. I had to modify this arm. I took this Yamaha key and I modified that to fit the Bari. I had to make this key. I had to remake this key. I had to make both the palm keys here. Made those. I had to make the F sharp key. Where is it here? Yeah, the F sharp key. And there. And I had to make these bell keys. as well as this low C and this low E flat and the low C sharp. And I also made my own spatulas, so those are handmade as well. So a lot of the sax was rebuilt because a lot of the keys were missing. And I figured, since it was such a huge rebuild anyway, I might as well build it the way I want and have it more ergonomic. I also made a bell to body brace that says MG. I thought that was kind of cool. And made another brace around this side so that that bell isn't going to swing back and forth and put these bell keys out of adjustment. So there it is. Saxophone number 5, modification, an old Conn Bari Sax.